Thank you all for coming this afternoon. We wanted to put this together to go through some of the details of the first part of our reorganization of the Albuquerque Police Department. We mentioned this obviously last week at a high level to give folks a heads up, and now we're here today to share with you some of the details. Like any reorganization, we are starting from the top, and so we have lots of clarity at the top. But like all transition and reorganization processes, as we get deeper into the organization, there's a whole lot of work to do and a lot of questions and a lot of things we're still looking at. But I want to reflect a little bit on the journey that got me here today and what I learned from officers and from our community. And it is reflected in this reorganization. I know some folks have mentioned that wow, what a surprise. A mayor's actually doing what he campaigned on. So in this case, this is true. And we talked about this extensively, and I talked about this extensively over the course of 56 public forums. So while this is no surprise, I hope it's refreshing that we're actually doing what we talked about. Now, we also worked with rank and file officers as well as our current command structure to put this together. This is very much our effort, and in fact, APD took my input and then came up with a plan and brought it together. And so that's why our chief is going to walk through the details here after I'm done. Now, the first step of this process was, of course, appointing new leadership at APD, which is standing up here with me today. The second step of this was working with them in terms of how do we restructure the organization best to accomplish the goals that we've set out for our police department. And now together we're taking this next step as a way to position our department to better fight crime, foster community policing, reduce bureaucracy, and also address the DOJ requirements. And so we're building each one of these goals into the organizational structure going forward. Now, the new working structure is one that rank and file officers also supported in many ways because it hopefully pushes a lot of activity and resources and abilities further and further down towards the front line. And that's going to be a long process, but this is the beginning of that process. Now, we're creating more efficiency and effective policing services by eliminating a top-heavy structure and including the ranks of major and assistant chief of police to get more officers back on the streets and more officers in the area commands to have a more decentralized model. And so this new structure is the first step in helping us create true community policing that is based in neighborhoods, not downtown in City Hall. We're also creating a new compliance bureau to be specifically accountable for transparently dealing with the DOJ reforms. And that's, of course, going to be run by our Deputy Chief Garcia. And we're going to continue to work in that specific division and set it up so that they can be in a place to succeed when it comes to compliance with the DOJ reforms. And so you'll see further changes down the road in that area, but we are isolating it so that we can hold it accountable and be transparent in terms of what we're doing for DOJ requirements, and also so that frontline officers know where to go to with issues, concerns, and dealings with respect to anything DOJ related. So change starts at the top, and we're committed to accountability under this new structure. And to tell us about the details of this structure, our new Chief of Police, Mike Geyer. Thank you.
Thank you. As the mayor said, basically he's committed to fighting crime. And so the reorganization of the department represents the first step that we'll take in an effort to foster community policing, reduce bureaucracy, and better address requirements under the federal court agreement. A more effective department will show that our leadership, everyone up here, is committed to that change and also working with the community in partnership to fight crime. So essentially, the initial restructuring that you'll see, and we'll explain in detail here today, advances several objectives, all of which will help the department recruit new officers and hopefully, ultimately keep the community safe. So to that end, there's four major areas that we've addressed here. The first one, it creates an environment that is conducive to community policing. How is that? Commanders who reapply for positions are going to be assessed on their commitment to carry out that very mission of community policing. By eliminating the ranks of major and assistant chief, we'll get more officers, a few more officers back on the street into the area commands for that purpose. Secondly, it better complies with the court-ordered DOJ requirements. This new compliance bureau is going to oversee all the functions. I mean, there's other aspects that are going to be involved, but that's the essence of what they're there for. We designated a deputy chief primarily who's had experience in that regard, working over the past few years with them. He's going to focus on those department reforms and helping us ensure that we get in compliance with those federal requirements on that settlement. Third, we're going to create a much more efficient and effective police service. We're eliminating the top-heavy structure, again, that confusion with the bureaucracy at the top, and that's all in favor of supporting the officers in the field. We want the top command to be understanding of the fact that that's what they're for, is to help the field. It shouldn't be vice versa, where they work for us. It also is going to improve communication, because now you got all uniform officers under one deputy chief rather than two, and the confusion of having conflicting orders or conflicting understandings of policy or whatever that has caused some issues in the past. And fourth and last, in this regard, and there's much more aspects that it broadens out, but it's going to create more accountability. When you have more of a direct control over situations, a more flat organization, you're going to be able to get better results. And again, as the mayor mentioned, change starts and accountability starts at the top. And the chief and deputy chiefs now will oversee a much more streamlined organization. So to give you an overview of this chart, and you guys will be, I guess, welcome to come up and take pictures, and I think we're also going to send electronically a version to all of the media outlets. But basically, I'll give you an overview. The new organization now has 4 bureaus with 4 deputy chiefs. And if you look at the top of the chart, you'll see in closer detail, but basically, Compliance Bureau, Field Services Bureau, Admin Service, and there's an Investigations Bureau as well. So in the police organization, it's followed by divisions and sections and going down to the officer level, but you can look at the oversight. This is kind of condensed of all the officers that we have in the APD. There's an executive director position that will now become a division manager that will strictly be involved in supervising and working with the people with the CASA, the court-appointed settlement agreement personnel, and under the direction of that aforementioned deputy chief. We made some changes with behavioral. We're in compliance in all areas pretty much with behavioral sciences and behavioral health division, but we've now separated in 2 sections that make it much more effective in terms of operations. The crisis intervention section, and these are not just the crisis intervention team officers that wear a uniform and are out there every day. This is the investigative component. They're all sworn personnel. I think there's 12 of them back there. They're supervised by a sergeant and a lieutenant. So again, for structures in our organization in terms of investigating any type of operational issues, we want operational people that are familiar with that. The new structure will still retain the behavioral health section, that part of it, and those are the new clinicians, the outreach people that are going out there, the mobile crisis teams and support teams, as well as the behavioral science section that always has existed in our department. With these 4 bureaus, what we've done is we've eliminated the deputy or assistant chief position. We've eliminated one executive director, and we no longer require a commander under the Compliance Bureau because it's now led by a deputy chief. Technically, by eliminating these 2 positions, we save money in terms of, and also organizational streamlining gives us more efficiency, so we know exactly they're not always wearing 2 hats. They're focused on their particular purpose and function. So I guess at this point, we'll open up to any questions specifically related to the organizational structure and the changes that we made today and introduced.
Chief, I have some questions. From what I'm counting, it's gone from, it looks like more than 20 staffers to 6.
I believe 6 or 7 was the number. Yes, that sounds accurate.
Are you going to have a commander or captain at the substations?
Yes, each substation will, as always, is in charge, and I think there's 13 commanders. Whatever their function was before, we'll keep those commanders' positions. We're not eliminating any of those positions.
And then my other question was, how many of the brass from the previous administration were asked to retire or be demoted?
Well, we didn't ask anybody to retire. Some people voluntarily came forward. At least I think we have 3 retirements at this point. 4, I think there's 4 actually, and 1 that will step down in rank. So a total of 5 at this point.
Were there resignations once the changes were announced, or retirements or resignations?
There were some prior to us coming on board at the major rank. There was a vacancy there that we didn't fill because that retirement occurred before December 1st, and then another one that occurred, I think, the first week of December, but had already been submitted before. Does that answer?
Yeah, so nobody retired after you announced these changes last
Other
week?
than these more recent ones, not at the top level, not to my knowledge.
Are you all concerned at all that these folks can handle all these responsibilities that they're getting now?
Well, you could ask them, but they have all reassured me that they're ready to take on those responsibilities. We all know that it's a lot of extra, it's going to be a lot of extra work. But with this process, it makes things a little more simpler and more efficient, so it's not spread out as much where it is difficult, even if you have, the original number, like you said, 20, if they're all spread out and there's no joint communications or kind of consistency, a thread that runs universal through the department, this will actually make it easier in the long run. So yes, maybe a few more duties, but under one direct line of control.
And then I see Erica
Yeah.
Wilson
Sure.
is not.
Just also want, folks to know too, that the major rank did not exist before at APD. So officers are familiar with this structure because it's what the department has looked more or less like, other than the DOJ piece, for a long time. It was just recently when they added in this extra layer.
That's correct.
I see, and Erica Wilson was in charge of communications. Is she still?
Yes,
How many people were demoted?
by demoted means stepping down in rank.
Yeah.
Just one.
Okay.
At a glance, this is going to look like more with less.
Yes.
Is that fair
yes.
to say?
That's probably a pretty good assessment.
We talk about recruiting and hiring. How short are we on officers right now?
Well, I think in reality, we're around 840 officers. So I don't know if we have a set, I mean, at one time it was 1,100. Realistically, we could use, more than that even. We don't have a set number, but we are understaffed, and we probably could fill up to 1,000. And if we could do that, that would be a first step toward at least reaching some type of solvency in that area.
And when you have these vacancies, how will you fill those? Are people going to, will they interview? How will you fill those positions?
As far as the commander positions?
Yeah, there's a lot of empty spots still there.
Right, well, all the command,
There's people, there's people in those boxes, just so you know, we just wanted to show the sort of new names at the top. But everyone at the commander level is acting status right now, and so the next step for the leadership is to review that level, but there are acting commanders in place for every area command.
right, and there will be a process of selection that we'll do.
Does this affect the academy oversight in any way with the top down?
No, they still, rather than answer to a major, they'll answer to a deputy chief now.
Is there any concern that you all lost a lot of really seasoned officers?
At the top level? Well, there is and there isn't, because sometimes, just because somebody has a tenure on a job doesn't mean that they're doing the job as well as they may have done when they first started. I'm not pointing any fingers, but typically as people advance toward the end of their career and approaching retirement, they may have less energy, they may have less motivation to do, especially to deal with all the stuff that we're tasked with now. But it doesn't mean that just because they had seniority. Part of my plan is a succession plan for the future leadership, so we're going to start with developing the leaders that are coming up through the ranks, so that after us, the legacy of the department will be that they can do that much better and can take and be handed off a more efficient and well-organized agency.
Is there any consideration of proposing a public safety tax to hire more officers on?
I'll defer that to the mayor, if you don't mind.
We can just stand there.
Sure.
So right now we're so early in the process, I also just want to reiterate, this is day 13, so not that we're counting. And so as we get into the budget discussions, all options are on the table. That's what I said from day one. But we certainly hope that we can do things like restructuring and so forth to find the money that we need. But that's really one that genuinely we're going to have to talk about later.
And Chief, I guess in your past time at APD, when there was a change in mayor and administration, was it common for commanders to have to reapply?
Well, it was different during most of my career because that rank was captains, which actually fell under the union. to some extent, so there was a whole different process. I think it was, I'm going to say 2007 is when they changed the rank of captain to commander, making it an at-will type employee. So after that, there has been change and movement, but probably never to this extent.
And
More question?
So just for some clarification, we're now seeing, like I said, more than 20 names, and now there's 6. But these positions are going to be filled. We just haven't decided who's going to.
Right, there's an acting upgrade right now, but we'll film what permanent positions are.
So the big changes are you got rid of the major assistant police chief,
Yes,
and then you'll still have commanders.
yes.